"Grandpa, are you really moving to a nursing home after tonight?" my 10-year-old grandson asked softly as I helped him clear the Thanksgiving dinner plates. His innocent question struck me like a lightning bolt, splitting my world into a before and an after. I, a devoted grandfather who had always put my family first, felt my heart drop into my stomach. I had no idea my own children were planning to uproot me from my home. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced a gentle smile and patted his shoulder. Moments later, I excused myself and left my son's house early, feigning a headache to mask my turmoil. What I did next, my carefully planned revenge for their betrayal, would shock everyone. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. I promise, Dad, this is going to be a special Thanksgiving, my son David insisted over the phone that morning. His voice had a strained cheeriness that set my instincts on edge. "It'll just be us and the kids. We really want to talk to you about some family decisions, afterward." I balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder, stirring a pot of my famous gravy on the stove. For 68 years I'd celebrated Thanksgiving with full hearts and crowded tables, but this year was the first since my wife's passing that it would be just my son's family and me. Family decisions. I repeated, trying to keep my tone light. Since when did we need a private meeting on a holiday? 35 years in business had taught me how to read between the lines. David sounded like a salesman pitching something he wasn't sure I'd buy. "Nothing to worry about," David rushed to add. I heard a muffled whisper in the background, likely his wife, Angela, feeding him lines. "We've been thinking about the future, making sure you're comfortable and taken care of as you get older. Mary, Angela, has some ideas." My grip tightened on the wooden spoon. Taken care of. The phrase slithered into my ear with cold familiarity. Lately Angela had been dropping hints about my living alone, the size of my house, the burden of maintaining it, how concerned she was for my health. Just a month ago, she'd sent me an article about the top 10 luxury retirement communities, casually mentioning how nice it would be for me to have on-site medical care and social activities. At the time, I'd thanked her for thinking of me, oblivious to the calculation behind her smile. I took a slow breath, willing my voice to remain steady. "I appreciate the thought, son. We can talk after dinner. I'm bringing the pumpkin pie and my gravy, as promised." "That's great, Dad," David replied, relief and something else, nerves, mixing in his tone. "And, maybe come a bit early. Say around 3. We can eat at 4 and have plenty of time to catch up." "Sure," I said evenly. "I'll be there at 3 on the dot." I hung up and turned off the stove, my appetite suddenly gone despite the rich aroma of sage and roasting turkey in my kitchen. The sunlit silence of my house felt heavy. I walked into the living room, my eyes drifting to the row of family photos on the mantel. In one frame, taken nearly 20 years ago, a younger me grinned proudly beside my wife Marjorie and our son at his college graduation. In another, baby pictures of my 2 grandchildren, Ethan and Lucas, their faces smeared with birthday cake as I held them steady. Each snapshot glowed with the promise that all my sacrifices were worth it, that family was a bond that could never be broken. Now I wasn't so sure. Lately those bonds had frayed into something transactional and cold. I ran a thumb over Marjorie's smiling face behind the glass. "I wish you were here, Marge," I murmured. The ache of her absence was sharpest on days like this. She had always been the one who mediated tensions, who saw through pretenses. If she were alive, would she have spotted what I'd missed? Perhaps she had. Her final words to me in the hospital 2 years ago echoed in my mind, "Take care of our family, Tom. But don't let them take advantage of you. Promise me." At the time, I brushed it off as morphine-induced worry. Our son and his wife had been so attentive during Marjorie's illness, or so I thought. Angela cooked meals for us, and David drove Marjorie to chemo when I was tied up with work. In my grief after losing my wife, I poured even more of myself into supporting my son's young family. I paid off their medical school loans, gifted them a down payment for their house in a better school district, and covered little Ethan's asthma treatments when insurance fell short. I never thought of it as supporting them so much as just family taking care of family. Isn't that what we do? Yet, bit by bit over the last 2 years, the requests had escalated. A little help with the mortgage 1 month turned into me quietly making their house payments every month. Covering one granddaughter's preschool tuition somehow became funding both grandsons' private school fees. David's new job fell through early this year, and I didn't hesitate to step in and make sure my grandchildren's lives stayed stable. I even let them put my name on a couple of credit cards to float expenses, trusting my son to manage them. I close my eyes, the weight of realization heavy on my chest. Had I been helping out of love, or enabling out of guilt and loneliness? Probably both. And now they were planning something under the guise of concern for me. The phone call had sharpened my senses. Something wasn't right. My son's too bright tone, Angela's stage-managing whispers, this sudden urgency to discuss my future on Thanksgiving of all days, it all felt rehearsed. They have a plan, I thought, a chill creeping up my spine. And it likely wasn't one I'd like. I carefully wrapped the warm pie and gravy to go, then went to my study to retrieve a bottle of red wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. As I opened the cabinet, a folder slipped off the top of my file drawer and spilled papers across the floor. I knelt with a quiet groan, my knees protesting after decades of wear, and gathered them. It was a stack of bank statements and check images, ones I'd requested last spring during tax season and never fully sorted. A $2,000 check to Angela for home repairs. A $5,500 transfer for David's SUV when his old car died unexpectedly. The amount seemed to glare up at me. I rifled through more pages, $82,000 in withdrawals and payments to my son's family over the past 3 years. I sank onto the edge of the couch, paper trembling in my hand. I knew I had given a lot, but seeing the total made my mouth go dry. That was more than my entire pension for a year. How had I managed to juggle that? The answer lay in the second mortgage I'd quietly taken on my own house, something I justified as temporary until David was back on his feet. Here I was, a semi-retired manufacturing manager who'd scrimped and saved, now carrying debt in my golden years because I couldn't say no to my only child. A bitter taste filled my mouth as I tucked the statements back into the folder. It's just money, I had always told myself, they're family. Marjorie's gentle voice echoed in memory, Tom, don't drain yourself for others without asking anything in return. They need to stand on their own too. I used to laugh and say a parent's job was to give unconditionally. Now, headed to a Thanksgiving that felt more like an ambush, I wondered if I'd made a grave mistake. I pulled up to David and Angela's suburban home at 3 o'clock sharp, just as I promised. It was a crisp November day, the last golden leaves clinging to the maple in their front yard. The house looked festive from the outside, warm light aglow in the windows and a harvest wreath on the door. I balanced the pie, gravy, and wine bottle in my arms as I rang the bell. To my surprise, it was my daughter-in-law who answered, not one of the grandkids. Angela practically beamed at me, her smile so wide and bright it looked painted on. Tom. Happy Thanksgiving, Dad, she sang out, pulling me into a hug that lasted a second too long. The scent of her strong perfume and an even stronger whiff of wine clung to her. I stepped inside, managing not to drop anything as she fussed over taking the pie dish from my hands. You look wonderful, she gushed, patting my shoulder. And you brought wine. How thoughtful. Let me take that and your coat. This enthusiasm was odd. Angela is usually cordial but brisk with me, a quick hug, then off to the kitchen or her phone. Today she hovered at my elbow, helping with my coat and practically hanging it for me. In the living room doorway, my son appeared, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Happy Thanksgiving, Dad. David's greeting boomed too heartily. He came forward and wrapped me in a bear hug. He hadn't hugged me like that in years. When he stepped back, I saw the towel in his hand was visibly shaking. "How was the drive?" "I'm so glad you came early. We have everything almost ready." His eyes flicked to Angela, and they exchanged the briefest glance. In that split second, I caught it, a spark of nervous energy passing between them, an unspoken stay on script. My stomach tightened. The drive was fine. "I brought my contributions," I said lightly, holding up the gravy thermos. I tried to hand the wine to David, but Angela intercepted it with a little laugh. "You relax. We'll handle everything. You just sit and enjoy your family today," she insisted. "Ethan. Lucas. Come say hi to Grandpa." The patter of feet thundered from upstairs. My grandsons appeared at the top of the staircase and bounded down. 10-year-old Lucas reached me first, nearly tackling me around the waist. "Grandpa, happy Thanksgiving," he shouted, grinning up at me with his missing front tooth. Despite the heaviness in my heart, I couldn't help but smile genuinely and ruffle his sandy hair. "Happy Thanksgiving, kiddo. Wow, have you grown again? You'll be taller than me soon." He giggled and stepped back as his older brother came forward more sedately. Ethan, at 16, had recently adopted the cool indifference of adolescence. He gave me a one-armed hug, his other hand never relinquishing the phone he was scrolling. "Hey, Grandpa," he mumbled. I looked him over. He was nearly a head taller than me now, all lanky limbs and faint acne on his cheeks. "Good to see you, Ethan," I said earnestly. "How's school? Still playing soccer?" "Yeah," he replied, eyes flicking up briefly from his screen. "School's fine." Then, as if remembering something, he pocketed his phone and mustered more enthusiasm. "Actually, Grandpa, thanks again for the new cleats and gear. Coach put me in last game, and we won. I scored a goal." My heart warmed a little. "That's great. I'm proud of you." I had shelled out nearly $800 at the start of fall for top-line athletic gear after Angela mentioned Ethan might not make varsity with worn-out equipment. Hearing that thank you, however belated and prompted, soothed me more than I expected. Maybe, just maybe, I was wrong about my worries. Maybe today really was just about family time. "Dinner's ready," Angela trilled from the dining room. "Come to the table, everyone." We gathered around the table, which was impressively decked out. A golden roast turkey took center stage, surrounded by all the sides: fluffy mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, sweet potatoes with marshmallow crust, and my stuffing and gravy. Angela had even used her fine china and crystal wine glasses, usually reserved for when her own parents or important guests visited. I was flattered, until I recalled that her parents weren't here this year. "They'd prefer if you weren't here," David had told me last Christmas when I was uninvited. Now the sudden absence of Angela's notoriously judgmental mother and father struck me as curious. Why were they not joining us? Thanksgiving was typically rotated between families. Perhaps Angela wanted them away for this discussion later. A lump caught in my throat. I was possibly the only target at this dinner. "Tom, would you like to do the honors and carve?" Angela asked sweetly, offering me the knife at the head of the table where they'd seated me. "Yes, Grandpa, you always carve best," Lucas chimed in, climbing into his seat. I glanced at David, who was pouring wine into glasses, including one for me, though I hadn't been asked. He just assumed I'd drink. His eyes were fixed on the knife in my hand, a tight smile on his lips. He looked almost relieved. No, anticipatory. I cleared my throat. "I'd be honored." The polished blade glinted under the chandelier as I began to slice the turkey. The familiar motion steadied me momentarily. For the next few minutes, conversation was casual and pleasant. We passed around dishes, and I pretended not to notice that both my son and Angela were sneakily watching how much wine I drank or if I seemed lucid. I limited myself to a few sips, chasing it with water. I wasn't about to even get tipsy, not today. "This is delicious, Angela," I complimented after a few bites. She was a fine cook when she put in the effort. She flashed me a genuine-looking smile. Thank you, Tom. I'm so glad you came. It means a lot to us to have a nice, intimate Thanksgiving. She stressed the word as if to remind everyone that it was just us. Ethan was already on his second heap of turkey and half listening to music through one AirPod hidden by his hair. Lucas chattered about how his class made handprint turkeys in school. Through it all, David and Angela kept the mood buoyant, almost exaggeratedly so. They laughed at my mild jokes a bit too loudly, agreed with everything I said a bit too eagerly. An hour later, when we'd all had seconds, and the boys thirds, I sat back and observed the scene quietly over my water glass. Ethan had retreated to the couch with a plate of pie, and Lucas was on the floor playing with the dog, happily full. The adults remained at the table, finishing the wine. My son was on his third glass, Angela on her fourth if I counted right, though she handled it well. I had barely touched mine since dinner. The conversation had been steered towards me several times, specifically, my house, my health, my hobbies. You're still living in that big place all alone, huh? David had said with a sympathetic tilt of his head. Must be a lot of upkeep. How's the knee treating you on those stairs? I told him truthfully that my knee only ached occasionally and the house was fine. Angela had jumped in to reminisce about the time I slipped on an icy porch step last winter. Such a scare. We were so worried. It made us realize how quickly accidents can happen. Remember, David, she had said. My son nodded somberly. At one point, Angela casually asked if I'd ever consider hiring a housekeeper or maybe downsizing to a condo. I replied that I liked my home of 40 years and was managing, but thanks for the concern. Each of my responses, however cheerful, seemed to frustrate them in subtle ways. Their fishing expedition wasn't yielding the signs of frailty they wanted. I noticed Angela refilling my wine glass unprompted whenever it dipped below half full. She and David shared quick glances whenever I politely sipped but didn't drink deeply. I pretended not to see those silent communications, playing the part of the oblivious, grateful dad enjoying a rare close holiday. Inside, a quiet anger was building, fueling a clarity I hadn't felt in years. By the time dessert was finished and darkness had fallen outside, I felt as though I'd sat through an awkward play where the actors occasionally forgot their lines. Everyone was smiling too much, speaking too sweetly. It was exhausting. I longed to cut through the charade, but I needed to see what exactly they had in store. Angela cleared her throat and looked at David. He nodded slightly. She turned to the boys. Ethan, Lucas, why don't you take some pie into the living room and watch a movie? Your dad and I want to have a grown-up talk with Grandpa. Lucas started to protest. He loved our post-dinner board games and likely expected one, but Ethan nudged him, and the two left, each taking a plate of pie. As he exited, Ethan gave me a strange, fleeting look. Pity, maybe. Or guilt. It was gone before I could be sure. Angela began stacking dishes with nervous energy, and David took a deep breath, scooting his chair closer to mine. Dad, now that we have a moment, there's something important we'd like to discuss. My hand tightened around my water glass under the table. Here we go. I gave him an encouraging nod, feigning cluelessness. Of course, son. What's on your mind? He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a small voice piped up from the hallway. Mom. I can't find the whipped cream, Lucas called, peeking around the corner. Angela pursed her lips, clearly irritated by the interruption. In the fridge, honey, on the top shelf, she answered, shooing him off. She turned back to me with a thin smile. Now, as we were saying, I seized the brief disruption to recalibrate. My heart was thumping in my chest at what I suspected was coming. They'd try to ease into it, but I could guess, something about me not being alone anymore, about making things legal for them to help me. Perhaps they had papers ready for me to sign tonight. I realized my palms were damp. Steady, I told myself. Let them make the first move, but be ready. As Angela sat down again, laying a hand over David's, I suddenly felt too warm. Anxiety, anger, betrayal, all swirling inside me, threatening to show on my face. I needed a moment alone to keep my composure. I pushed back from the table slowly. Actually, could we hold that thought? I think I had a bit too much turkey and pie, I chuckled, putting a hand on my stomach. Nature calls. Don't start without me. I gave a rueful smile and stood. David looked startled, then quickly said, "Sure, Dad. We'll wait. You know where the bathroom is. I'll just be a minute." I walked down the hall, deliberately choosing the longer route to the upstairs bathroom instead of the powder room next to the dining area. As soon as I was out of their sight, my face fell. My jaw clenched as I climbed the stairs one slow step at a time, considering what awaited me back at that table. At the top of the stairs I paused, taking a deep breath. The door to my grandson's bedroom was open a crack, and I heard the low drone of a cartoon on TV. The boys must have decided to camp in Lucas's room for their movie. Then I heard something that made me stop cold. Over the cartoon sounds, Ethan's hushed voice, "I don't think Grandpa knows. He seems normal." Lucas whispered back, "Mom said he wouldn't understand what's happening even if they told him. She said he forgets things, but he doesn't seem forgetful." I inched closer to the door, hardly daring to breathe. They were talking about me. "Mom and Dad just don't want him to freak out when they take his money," Ethan muttered. "They said it's for the best, right? That he'll be happier not worrying about it." My blood ran cold. Even the children were aware of something regarding my money. Perhaps not the full scope, but enough. I felt simultaneously ill and furious. Lucas sounded uncertain. I heard Mom say he has too much money for an old man alone. That it's dangerous for him or something. But Grandpa's not dangerous. He's nice. I realized my youngest grandson truly didn't grasp the meaning. He likely thought I was in danger, not that I posed one. Ethan sighed. "They just mean he might get scammed or hurt or something. They're gonna, take over his account so they can pay for stuff for him. And probably we can get a new pool and stuff when they have the money. It's not a big deal." He was trying to sound worldly and unconcerned, but I detected a slight quiver in that last sentence, as if he was trying to convince himself, too. Lucas's reply was heartbreakingly earnest, "I don't want Grandpa to go to a home. I'll miss him." My eyes burned suddenly. Dear God. They had even discussed me leaving the family home with the kids, framing it as some benign inevitability. Lucas's small voice wavered on the brink of tears. Ethan responded quietly, "Me too. But Mom said he'll only be 20 minutes away and we can visit sometimes." He paused. "And she said if he doesn't agree, they'll have to, make him because it's what's best." A hot tear escaped down my cheek. I quickly wiped it away. Hearing this from my grandchildren, my flesh and blood, was like being skinned alive with each soft word. They were planning to force me out, to make me for my own good. My son had primed his kids to accept that Grandpa would be removed from his own life soon, and that it was all okay. Anger flared, white-hot and cleansing, cutting through the despair. Make me, would they? Not if I had any say in the matter. I stepped back silently and moved further down the hall to the bathroom, closing the door behind me with the faintest click. I didn't even need to use it, I just stared at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. A gray-haired man with tired eyes and a face lined by both age and that moment's pain stared back. In that moment, I saw someone I hadn't seen in a long time, Thomas Abernathy, not just Grandpa or Dad. A man who once negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, who led teams of engineers on projects around the world, who navigated crises with level-headed resolve. I had allowed myself to fade into the background of my family's life, a walking wallet to fund their dreams. I'd been doing it partly out of love, partly to fill the void Marjorie left, and partly because I foolishly thought if I gave enough, I'd always be needed and included. That ends today. I took 2-3 deep breaths. My racing heart steadied into a slow, firm rhythm. In the span of those breaths, I made my decision. I would not confront them blindly tonight. I needed to know everything they were plotting and have a countermeasure for each move. I'd play along just enough to learn the scope of their scheme. Then, I would crush it. Legally, financially, completely. And I'd do it in a way that they could never see coming, because they believed I was too old, too weak, too dumb to fight back. Turning on the faucet, I splashed cool water on my face. The shock of it sharpened my resolve. I practiced a mildly weary expression in the mirror and rehearsed a shaky breath or two. If they expected a tired, confused old man, I would give them one, until I was ready to strike. I returned downstairs slowly, using the banister for support and exaggerating the stiffness in my knee. As I reached the bottom, I saw Angela and David speaking in urgent whispers by the dining table. They jumped apart as soon as they saw me. "Everything okay, Dad?" David asked, concern lacing his tone as he moved toward me. He had the nerve to take my elbow like I needed help down the last step. I let him. I nodded and gave a self-deprecating chuckle. Yes. Sorry, took me a bit. These old joints aren't what they used to be. I sank into my chair with a sigh for effect. I noticed Angela subtly slide a manila folder that had been on the table into a kitchen drawer, as if hiding it. My pulse quickened at the sight of that folder. So, they had documents prepared. Perhaps hoping to get me to sign tonight. Not a chance, I thought. All right, where were we? I asked, adopting a mildly puzzled tone as if I'd lost track. Angela shot a quick look at the kitchen drawer and then returned to the table, sitting opposite me. Her smile returned, a fraction more strained than before. We wanted to talk to you about the future, Tom. About making sure you have everything you need and that all of us are protected. David cleared his throat. He pulled his chair closer to mine and put on the face he'd likely practiced in the mirror, a mix of sympathy and firmness. Dad, Angela and I have been worried about you living alone. The house is so big, and we aren't as close by as we wish we could be to help at a moment's notice. I tilted my head. I appreciate the concern, son, but I manage pretty well. I've lived in that house for 40 years without trouble. I made my voice gentle, not defensive. Sure, you do great now, Angela interjected, reaching across to touch my forearm with patronizing affection. But you're 68, and we want to plan before anything might happen. God forbid you slip or have a medical issue when you're alone, she let the sentence dangle ominously. I looked down as if considering their words, masking the contempt threatening to show in my eyes. I have a life alert button and good neighbors. And you're 20 minutes away. Dad, David said, leaning forward, this isn't just about falls. Managing finances, keeping track of bills, that can get overwhelming as you get older. We think it would bring you peace of mind if we helped with that. Professionally and legally. There it was, creeping closer. I noticed his hand subtly moving toward the kitchen drawer, no doubt where the prepared papers lay in that folder. Angela chimed in, yes, exactly. We've consulted an attorney, just to explore options, and he suggested a power of attorney arrangement. You'd still be in control, of course, but we could help manage things, pay bills for you, make sure your accounts are handled if you're ever unable to. It's just a precaution. Her tone was sugar, but her eyes were on me like a hawk's, assessing my reaction. They expected confusion, perhaps resistance born of pride or paranoia. I gave them something else entirely. I let my face fall in troubled uncertainty. You talked to a lawyer about me? I asked, voice soft with hurt. Do you think I'm not managing? I infused a quaver into my words, as if the thought of losing control unsettled me. Both of them rushed to speak at once. No, it's not that, David protested. Of course not, Tom. Angela insisted. It's just planning, like drafting a will or buying insurance. We want to be ready before anything happens. We love you, and we've seen so many horror stories of families unprepared for an elder's care. This is just to make sure you're safe. I let that hang, then sighed, looking down at my liver-spotted hands. I suppose there's sense in being prepared. My tone was defeated. What would I have to do, exactly? Angela's eyes practically gleamed, but she kept her voice soothing. Nothing much. Just sign a few standard documents. They give David and me authority to handle things on your behalf, banking, property, medical decisions in an emergency, so I'd be signing over control of my money to you? I interrupted, feigning worried skepticism. It's shared control, David corrected quickly. We can only use it to help you, Dad. And you'd be right there with us, making decisions. Think of it as a safety net. A safety net. Right. One they could yank away whenever they pleased, leaving me dangling. I rubbed my temple as if confused, casting my gaze to the side. From my peripheral vision, I saw Angela stand and retrieve the manila folder from the drawer. She placed it on the table and opened it to reveal a neat stack of forms with color-coded tabs and sticky notes where signatures were needed. My stomach churned at the sight. They had gone to great lengths to prepare for this. She slid a paper toward me. The top document had bold letters, durable power of attorney. There were 2 sets of them, I realized. One for financial and one for healthcare decisions. They truly meant to seize everything. Why don't we just take a look? Angela cooed, as if presenting something as simple as a recipe. We can explain any parts that are confusing. I lifted the paper in trembling hands and pretended to read. The words blurred, partly by my design, acting like my vision wasn't what it used to be, and partly by my genuine anger heating up again. My mind raced with possibilities. Should I refuse now? Demand they explain themselves to the kids, to me? Threaten to cut them off? I caught myself. No. A single angry outburst here would accomplish nothing. They'd double down, pressure me, perhaps even claim I was irrational and needed this for my own good. If I stormed off, they might try legal means anyway, behind my back. I needed to gather more ammunition, more evidence. Let them think I was digesting this. I set the paper down and removed my glasses, rubbing the bridge of my nose as if overwhelmed. This is a lot to take in, I said shakily. So many terms, fiduciary, powers. I'm not as sharp with these things as I used to be. David moved and put an arm around my shoulders in what likely looked like a comforting gesture but felt more like restraint. It's okay, Dad. We'll go through it step by step. We want you to feel good about this. We're doing it to help you, remember. I nodded slowly. I do trust you both, I said softly, and I saw a flicker of something like shame cross my son's face. Good. Feel that guilt, son. Angela slid a pen toward me, sensing victory. If you're ready, we can sign now. We even have a mobile notary lined up to come by tomorrow to finalize it, but we can get your part done tonight and have them witness tomorrow, no problem. They had thought of everything. Except the possibility that I might not comply. I picked up the pen, turning it in my fingers. Tomorrow? I echoed. You want to get this all done by tomorrow? Better sooner than later, Angela said, almost too quickly. She realized and tempered her tone to one of gentle reassurance. Just in case, you know. There's really no reason to delay getting these protections in place. I let my hand holding the pen hover over the document as if I were almost convinced. I saw them both hold their breath. Then I set the pen down. Could I think about it overnight? My head is pounding a bit from all this wine and excitement. I forced a chuckle. Old age, you know. I'd like to read through these carefully when I'm fresh in the morning, if that's okay. Angela's smile flickered, just for an instant. David's arms stiffened on my shoulders. They hadn't expected a delay once the prey was cornered. "Dad," David said, trying to keep his voice light, "we totally understand you want to review. But remember, we have that notary scheduled to come. It'd be a shame to cancel and have to reschedule. It might take weeks to get everyone together again." "Yes," Angela nodded, pushing the papers a tad closer. "And the sooner we have this done, the sooner you have peace of mind, Tom. Wouldn't it be nice to go to sleep tomorrow knowing your affairs are all sorted?" Her eyes bored into me. I realized this was a critical moment. If I continued to balk, they might escalate. They could call in the notary tonight, pressuring me further. Or worse, interpret my hesitation as incompetence. Perhaps that was their plan B. If I refused, claim I wasn't mentally fit to decide, and move straight to guardianship through courts. Something told me they wouldn't hesitate if provoked. I needed to retreat strategically, on my terms. I mustered a wan smile. "You're probably right. Sorry, I'm just tired." I gently shook off David's arm and stood, feigning a slight wobble. "Actually, more than tired, I feel a bit dizzy. Might be my blood pressure. I think I should lie down." Instantly, Angela was up, concern plastered on her face. "Oh dear, do you need your medication? Are you having chest pain?" David hovered near. "Do you want to stay here tonight, Dad? We can call a doctor." I waved them off weakly. No. I just need rest. I have my medication at home. I'd feel better in my own bed." Angela's eyes widened slightly. If I left without signing, their plan was delayed. Possibly they feared I might tell someone or change my mind. She started, "Maybe David should drive you." "That's not necessary," I interrupted gently. "I'm okay to drive. Just a bit flushed. The fresh air will do me good." David looked genuinely worried now, but whether it was for me or for their derailed scheme, I couldn't be sure. "At least let me walk you out. And you'll call when you get home, so we know you're safe." I nodded. Of course. I casually, but deliberately, left the unsigned papers on the table. As far as they knew, I intended to sign them first thing tomorrow. Angela bit her lip. She likely was deciding whether to push harder now. But if they truly believed I might be woozy or unwell, pressing me tonight could backfire. If I fainted or had an incident, they'd have a real emergency instead of a contrived one. Ultimately, she forced a smile and handed me my coat. "We only want what's best for you, Tom. Get a good night's rest, okay? We can finalize everything in the morning if you're up to it." Her attempt at a casual tone didn't hide the steel beneath. I nodded, avoiding her gaze lest my own anger break through. "Thank you, Angela. You're very kind." The lie tasted bitter. I kissed her cheek out of long habit, and she stiffened, surprised by the affection. Good, maybe she'd think I was accepting her help fully now. David hovered by my side as I walked to the door. Lucas and Ethan poked their heads out of the living room, confusion on their faces. "You're leaving, Grandpa?" Lucas asked, concern crossing his small features. "Grandpa's not feeling well," Angela answered for me, though I could have spoken. "He's going home to rest, sweetie. Say goodnight." Lucas trotted over and hugged me tightly around the waist. "Good night, Grandpa. I love you." I nearly faltered. I hugged him back, closing my eyes at the ache in my chest. Despite everything, that pure love from a child can't be faked. "I love you too, kiddo. I'll see you very soon." Ethan stood back, hands in his pockets, looking conflicted. "Night, Grandpa," he said quietly. "Feel better?" I offered him a gentle pat on the shoulder as I passed. "Thank you, Ethan." Outside, the cold air hit my face and I realized I was sweating. David insisted on escorting me to my car. The street was quiet, houses aglow with dining rooms full of other families finishing their feasts, oblivious to the drama unfolding here. At my car, David hesitated. He looked genuinely sad and anxious. In that moment, under the dim streetlight, he was once again the little boy who used to cling to my pant leg on the first day of school, afraid to let me leave. My heart twisted. "Dad, are you really okay?" he asked softly. We didn't mean to push so hard. I opened the car door and took a seat behind the wheel to show confidence in driving. "I know you think you're helping, son." I gave him a tired smile. "Maybe I did overdo it today. We'll talk tomorrow, all right? I do understand why you're concerned." He let out a breath and nodded. "All right. We'll come by around 10. I'll take care of breakfast." "Sounds fine." I put the key in the ignition. David closed my door for me, peering through the window. "Drive safe. And call when you get home, okay?" I gave a little wave and pulled away from the curb, watching him recede in my rearview mirror. He stayed on the sidewalk until I turned the corner. The second I was out of their neighborhood, I gripped the wheel with both hands, knuckles white. A ragged breath left my lungs, half a sob, half a snarl of rage. That was too close. Another few minutes and they'd have had my signature. If I hadn't overheard the boys, I might have doubted myself and signed out of pressure and misplaced trust. My headlights cut through the dark, empty roads as I drove home. The reality of what had just happened crashed over me. My own child and his wife had tried to secure legal control over my life. They had primed my grandchildren to accept it. They wanted my money, my house, me, completely under their thumb or out of their way. A decades-old memory surfaced unbidden, the day David was born. I remembered holding that tiny, swaddled baby in my arms, overwhelmed with love and an almost crippling sense of responsibility. I swore in that moment to provide him the best life I could. Over the years, that promise translated into long hours at work, missed little league games, extra savings for college. Marjorie often told me to slow down and just be dad, but I believed showing love meant ensuring security. Now I wondered, had all my well-intentioned giving planted the seeds of greed? Had I done this to him, in part? I shook the thought away as I pulled into my driveway. No. People make their own choices. I gave out of love, they chose to twist it into entitlement. David was an adult responsible for his actions. And Angela, well, I'd long sensed a streak of vanity and ambition in her, but I never dreamed she'd stoop to this. Inside my dark house, I flicked on the entry light. The silence was heavy, but not lonely, it felt expectant, charged with purpose. This was no longer just my home, tonight, it became my war room. I kicked off my shoes and headed straight for the study. The adrenaline of anger and betrayal burned in my veins, banishing any fatigue. My headache was gone, replaced by cold clarity. They were coming at 10 a.m. with a notary. That gave me less than 16 hours to formulate a counterattack. I sat at my desk and pulled out a yellow legal pad, a relic from my working days when I tackled problems with pen and paper. At the top I wrote, plan. Underlined it twice. First, I listed what I knew of their plan. They had consulted a lawyer, likely an estate or elder law attorney, about power of attorney and possibly guardianship. They prepared POA documents for both finance and health, likely making them joint agents, or one primary, one secondary. Angela's comment about mental competency and, before things get more confusing, hinted they were also ready to question my cognitive abilities if needed. The kid said something about, if he doesn't agree, they'll make him, which implies a backup plan, possibly petitioning a court for conservatorship declaring me incompetent. They'd visited a bank or lawyer earlier in the week, according to Dorothy my neighbor. That conversation clicked into place. They were at First National Bank on Tuesday with papers. They had a notary ready for tomorrow, meaning they intended to have documents executed immediately, no delay. Second, I outlined my assets and vulnerabilities. My house, paid off, in my name only. Savings and investments, moderate. About $150,000 in various bank accounts, $300,000 in investment funds, plus an IRA. Additionally, I had a life insurance policy and a small annuity. Debts, a second mortgage of $50,000 from helping them, I'd kept that hidden, ironically they might not even know about it. Steady income, Social Security and a small pension, enough for my needs if I weren't funding two households. Health, by all measures good, no diagnosed cognitive issues. That was in my favor if this got legal, no doctor would currently attest I'm incompetent. Support network, a few close friends, my sister in Florida, some neighbors like Dorothy. Did I know any lawyers? Not closely, but my old college buddy, Frank, is a retired judge. That could help for advice. Knowledge, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm far from ignorant about legal documents and finance. They were counting on me being too muddled to navigate this. Big mistake. I tapped the pen on the pad, thinking. What did victory look like for me? Keeping my autonomy and holding them accountable. Possibly punishing them for the betrayal, though legally I doubted there was a crime yet. Attempted exploitation is hard to prove until something actually happens. But I could preempt them. One idea glared bright and immediate, change my will and estate plans, effective immediately. If they were so eager to control my assets, perhaps they shouldn't get any of them at all, or at least not directly. My original will, updated after Marjorie died, left everything to David, with a modest trust for each grandson's education. I had assumed my son would do right by his kids. Now I saw that could be disastrous. I grabbed my will folder from the cabinet. Reading it with fresh eyes made me grimace. It was straightforward, nearly all assets to my son. If I died tomorrow, Angela and David would inherit almost everything outright, aside from $50,000 set aside for each grandson's future. In practice, that meant Angela would likely control all of it. This won't do. I scribbled notes for a new will, possibly invert it, give the bulk to the grandchildren in trust, managed by an independent trustee, not their parents. Or perhaps leave it to someone else entirely as a temporary measure to protect it. Some people leave estates to a trust or charity if family is untrustworthy, though I didn't want to disinherit my grandkids truly, I just wanted to protect them from their own parents' greed. Time was short to craft something ironclad, but I could at least write a basic new will tonight and sign it with witnesses tomorrow morning. Witnesses. I'd need 2 non-family witnesses to sign. Possibly Dorothy next door and maybe her husband or adult daughter if around. I'd call in the morning early. Next, contact professionals who can help decipher what they've done so far. Dorothy's mention of First National Bank stood out. If they inquired there, I had a connection. My banking relationship is with that very bank, and the vice president, Harold, has known me 20 years. He might have been consulted or know if they asked to set up special accounts or had questions about my accounts. But on Thanksgiving night, he wouldn't be available. However, I recalled he once gave me his personal cell after we sponsored a charity together. I flipped through my old Rolodex, another relic, and found Harold Green's number. It was past 10 p.m. now, too late to call his personal line. Perhaps, but I decided to send a polite text in case he checked it. Harold, Tom Abernathy here. Urgent question regarding account planning. Possible fraudulent activity by family. Please call me tomorrow morning if possible. I hit send. Even if he didn't reply at night, maybe he'd see it first thing and call. Another angle, legal counsel. I wasn't sued or anything yet, but if they tried a guardianship route, I'd need a lawyer ready. Frank, my judge friend, could refer me to a good elder law attorney if needed. I decided to call him now, he'd forgive the late hour if I said it was important. Frank answered on the third ring, voice groggy. Hello. Frank, it's Tom. I'm sorry to wake you on Thanksgiving night, but I truly need some urgent advice. My voice shook despite my efforts to steady it. Immediately he sounded alert. Tom. What's wrong? Are you okay? I swallowed. I'm fine physically. But I think my son is trying to take control of my finances against my will. Possibly by tomorrow. I need to know what to do to protect myself. Frank didn't ask me for a full story then, though I'm sure he was curious. Instead he launched into brisk advice. He recommended a top-notch estate attorney in town, someone he trusted. I'll text you her contact. In the meantime, if they have documents or you suspect an attempt to declare incompetence, gather any records of your mental fitness, recent doctor checkups, etc. And if you can, get a friend or neutral party to witness anything that happens. I thanked him profusely. He ended with, Tom, whatever's happened, document everything while fresh in your mind. Times, dates, who said what. If this goes legal, that will be important. After hanging up, I did just that. Starting on a fresh sheet, I wrote down a summary of the night, the gist of the phone call for morning, Dorothy's comment at mall about bank, the granddaughter's whisper I overheard, the conversation over dinner, and what the boys said upstairs, that part 1 underlined, pure gold evidence of intent, though hearsay from kids might not stand up formally, it gave leads. I noted the attempted signing and my departure. I ended that log with the current time and date. There. If nothing else, that was a contemporaneous record. Frank's text arrived with the lawyer's info, Cynthia Sue, ESQ. Obviously I couldn't reach her now, but tomorrow I would call first thing. Next priority, fortify my finances immediately. If David had access to any of my accounts as a joint holder or knew my passwords, I had to lock them down. Thankfully, I'd never made him joint on anything yet. Tonight proved why that was wise. However, he did know which banks I used, and if he attempted any funny business like impersonating me or using the POA if I had signed, which I hadn't, I should alert the banks of potential fraud. I spent the next hour logging into each of my financial accounts online. I changed passwords to new, strong ones, and enabled two-factor authentication via my phone where possible. I checked recent activity for anything odd, just in case. They shouldn't have access yet, but who knows if they snooped through my desk or mail at some point. Everything looked normal, which was a relief. I also composed a draft email to my financial advisor letting him know I might freeze some actions due to family issues, to be sent in the morning. As I was updating these, a text pinged from Harold, the bank VP. Tom, received your message. Can call at 7 a.m. tomorrow if that's okay. I replied that it was, and thanked him. Good, he might have intel or at least put an alert on my accounts. It was nearly midnight when I finally sat back from the computer. I had accomplished a lot in a short time. But the biggest item remained, how to confront them and turn the tables, decisively, by 10 a.m. tomorrow. Confrontation. I needed witnesses, as Frank said. If I simply yelled at them here in my home, they could later deny or twist it. But if someone neutral saw them pushing me or heard admission of their motives, that would be powerful. What if I turned their notary plan on its head? They were bringing a notary expecting to finalize those POAs with me docilely signing. What if instead, that notary and maybe others bore witness to my refusal and my unveiling of their scheme? A vision formed, me sitting calmly at my kitchen table, with a notary and maybe Harold from the bank present, as my son and Angela arrive expecting an easy victory. Instead, they walk into a trap where their prepared documents are worthless and I have my own papers for them to sign, or at least revelations to break them. I quickly rang Dorothy, apologizing for the late hour, and asked for her help in the morning as a witness for some documents. Sweet neighbor that she is, she agreed immediately and even offered to come now if I needed. I told her to come at 9:30. I then called another friend, Marcus, who was a semi-retired CPA and one of my poker buddies. He had a sharp eye and knew my family. I invited him over at 9:45 and hinted at needing a witness for something important involving my will. He didn't ask many questions but said he'd be there. So that would be 2 witnesses at least. Plus Harold at 7 a.m. call, maybe I could convince him to also swing by if available, though as a bank VP on a Friday, he might be busy. Sleep was a distant thought, but I knew I needed at least a little rest to be sharp. I set an alarm for 6:30 a.m., took a quick shower to wash off the stress sweat of the day, and lay down in bed with my mind still churning. As I closed my eyes, another memory floated up, Marjorie, frail but fierce in her hospital bed, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll stand up for yourself when it counts, Tom. You spend so much energy taking care of others. Don't let anyone walk over you when I'm gone." At the time I laughed and told her not to worry, that David and I would take care of each other. How naive that sounded now. "I promise, Marge," I whispered into the darkness. "I won't let you down. Or myself." And with that, I drifted into a light, fitful sleep, mind rehearsing the showdown to come. Morning arrived gray and cold. Fitting, I thought, as I sipped a strong cup of coffee in my kitchen at 7 a.m. The weather matched the steely resolve I felt. At 7:05, my phone rang. It was Harold from First National Bank. "Good morning, Tom. I'm sorry to hear you've got trouble," he began. "What's going on?" Quickly, I filled him in on the broad strokes, that my son and Dale might attempt to use legal means to control my finances, possibly including contacting the bank. Harold listened thoughtfully. "On Tuesday, yes, I met with your son and his wife. They asked quite a few questions about adding authorized users to accounts, creating joint accounts, and procedures for emergency access. They insinuated it was for helping you. I assumed you had okayed it, but it did strike me as something you'd usually handle personally." My jaw clenched. They really had been laying groundwork. I did not okay anything. Did they try to access my accounts? They did not have any documents or POA at that time, just hypothetical questions, Harold replied. I, of course, told them any changes require your consent or an official POA on file. They seemed to be preparing to get one. They plan to as of this morning, I confirmed. Harold, I'd like to put a note on all my accounts, no new signatories or changes without my direct approval in person. Also, if any POA from them comes in, flag it and call me immediately to verify if I actually signed it under free will. Absolutely, he said firmly. I'll put high security alerts on your accounts. And Tom, if I may say, you sound perfectly lucid to me. If they try anything claiming you're incompetent, I'll be happy to provide a statement that you manage your finances astutely, as evidenced by you heading this off. I exhaled gratefully. Thank you, Harold. That means a lot. After we hung up, I felt more confident. One avenue for their scheme, banking access, was now significantly barricaded. Next, I called the estate attorney Frank recommended, even though it was early. To my surprise, she answered her work line. Maybe she anticipated post-holiday client needs. Ms. Sue was calm and quick on the uptake. She advised me to not sign anything, which I wasn't going to anyway, and said if they had started any guardianship filings, doubtful to move that fast, we'd respond legally. She offered to be on standby by phone if I needed her later when they arrived, and we set an appointment for Monday to formalize whatever new estate plans I wanted after the dust settled. At 9 o'clock, Dorothy from next door knocked, a basket of muffins in hand. Thought we might need some breakfast for this big to-do, she said with a conspiratorial wink. I hugged her, thankful. 10 minutes later, my friend Marcus arrived, briefcase in hand like he was coming to an audit. We had a few minutes to confer, and I caught them up on the general scenario. Both were appropriately horrified and readily agreed to witness whatever happened. I organized the kitchen like a boardroom. I set out the POA documents my family left behind, as evidence, as well as my new drafted will, 2 copies, one for signing, one spare, and a written statement I had prepared in the early morning hours. That statement basically declared, I, Thomas Abernathy, am of sound mind and revoke any previous powers of attorney. I have not granted power of attorney to anyone as of this date. Any document signed under duress is invalid. It might not be strictly necessary, but I wanted a signed, witness statement of my intentions in case things got legally messy. By 9:50, I saw through the window a car pulling up, an unfamiliar sedan. A tall woman in a blazer stepped out, carrying a briefcase. The notary, I presumed. I greeted her at the door and invited her in. She seemed a bit perplexed seeing a small gathering in the kitchen, but I explained, I wanted my friends here as additional witnesses, hope you don't mind. She nodded, setting her notary journal on the table. Not at all, if Mr. Abernathy prefers. Are we signing some documents this morning? I exchanged a loaded glance with Dorothy and Marcus. We'll see. The parties will be here soon. Right on cue, at 9:58, David's SUV came around the corner and into my driveway. My pulse quickened. Showtime. Angela was out of the car almost before it stopped, a leather folder clutched to her chest. David trailed, looking a little drawn. They hadn't expected an audience. I opened the door just as they reached it. Good morning, I greeted, my tone neutral. Dad, David began, then stopped as he noticed the notary behind me, visible through the door, and Dorothy and Marcus at the kitchen table. Angela's smile faltered for a split second. You're feeling better, I hope. Angela said carefully, peering at me. Yes, much better. Come in, please. I stepped aside. They entered, and we all moved to the kitchen. The notary introduced herself professionally. Good morning, I'm Nora James, the notary you requested. And you must be Mr. and Mrs. Abernathy. Angela recovered quickly, turning on the charm. Yes, thank you for coming, Nora. I'm Angela, this is my husband David, and of course, Tom, Dad, is our client today. She shot me a toothy smile. We really appreciate you doing this, Dad. I only hummed in response, gesturing them to have a seat opposite me at the table. They couldn't miss that I had their POA documents already laid out on the table, along with other papers. Angela's eyes darted to them and then back to me. David glanced at Dorothy and Marcus, perhaps recognizing them as my neighbors/friends, and seemed uneasy. So, shall we get started? Angela said, putting her folder down. We have the papers right, I held up a hand. Actually, before we get to any signing, I have a few things I'd like to clarify. I spoke steadily, projecting my voice a bit as if I were in a meeting. Angela's brow creased. Clarify? I folded my hands on the table. Yes. Firstly, I want it stated clearly, here in front of witnesses, what the purpose of these documents is. Would you mind explaining, Angela? She opened her mouth, closed it, then began sweetly, of course. As we discussed last night, Tom, these documents are simply to allow David and me to assist you with managing your affairs, financial and medical, in case you need the help. Many families do this to take the burden off aging parents. It's all about making sure you're cared for. She delivered that well, almost convincing in her benevolence. The notary nodded slightly, as if this was the usual spiel. I tilted my head. I see. And there are no other motives, then? Nothing about gaining control because you think I'm incompetent or plan to put me in a facility? A flush crept up Angela's neck. Dad. Of course not, where is this coming from? She forced a little laugh. David looked at me, troubled. We just want to help, Dad. Like we said. But his voice lacked conviction. I picked up their POA document and flipped through. So, if I sign this, you can access all my bank accounts, sell my property, and make any decisions for me if you claim I'm unfit, correct? That's what durable power means, it stays in effect even if I become incapacitated. The notary cleared her throat gently. He's correct in the definition. But typically it's used to help, as they said. Angela interjected, Dad, you make it sound so sinister. This is for your benefit. Why would we ever do anything to hurt you? We love you. Her performance was good, she even summoned a sheen of tears in her eyes for effect. I had to hand it to her, she could probably convince a stranger. But not me, not now. I nodded slowly. All right. Now, another clarification. Last night, when I was gone from the table, did you perhaps discuss what you'd do if I refused? Perhaps something about making me, because it's for the best. Angela froze, ever so briefly. I don't recall saying anything like that. Honey, did we? She looked at David, eyes widening slightly. David shifted uncomfortably. We were worried you might not understand that we're trying to help. Maybe we said we'd have to work hard to convince you, but nothing forceful. A diplomatic answer. But I had the exact phrase from Lucas in my pocket. My voice hardened just a touch. Let me be more direct. Did you or did you not tell my grandchildren that I have too much money for an old man living alone, and that you were going to fix that problem? Both their faces went slack with shock. Angela actually gasped. What? Who told you that? David looked genuinely panicked. Dad. The boys, they might have misheard or, I held up a finger. So it was said, then. Angela's composure cracked. She leaned forward, a pleading note in her voice. Tom, please. We were concerned, out of love, purely. Maybe I said something in private about you being alone with so much to manage. But that wasn't meant how it sounds. I pressed on relentlessly. And how about telling them I'd be moving out after some papers were signed? My 10-year-old grandson believed I was leaving my home imminently. I wonder where he got that idea. Angela flushed fully now, mouth opening and closing. David hung his head, silent. The notary looked very uncomfortable. Dorothy and Marcus were stone-faced, absorbing every word. Perfect. I let the silence stretch a moment, the only sound the ticking of the kitchen clock. My children were caught, and they knew it. Time to deliver the final blows. In light of all this, I said quietly, I have decided on a few changes. Angela straightened, clinging to perhaps a hope I might still sign if they apologized enough. Dad, we really only want what's best. If we mishandled it, I'm so sorry. We can slow down, do this however you need. Maybe involve another attorney to explain, whatever makes you comfortable. Desperation edged her voice. She knew the prize was slipping away. David finally spoke, voice trembling. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how upset all this made you. Maybe we came on too strong. But the last thing we want is to hurt you. I believed at least he felt some remorse. But it was too little, too late. I picked up my written statement I had prepared and slid it across to the notary. Nora, I'd like to notarize this statement first, please. It's a declaration that I have not and will not sign any power of attorney today except of my own volition and that I revoke any that might be in question. Angela made a small noise in her throat. David just looked resigned. The notary, to her credit, read it swiftly and said, Certainly, if that's what you want to do. I'll need your ID. As I provided my driver's license and signed the statement in front of her and my two witnesses, Angela began to quietly cry. Whether from frustration or genuine realization of wrongdoing, I wasn't sure. David put a hand on her shoulder, his face ashen. Once that was stamped and done, I felt a weight lift off me. They could no longer, even in some fantasy, claim I had signed their documents. Now, I said, pulling out the new will, one more piece of business. Angela looked up, eyes red. What's that? My updated will. I almost smiled at their shock. Yes, I decided I should have my estate in order given all this hubbub about planning. Dad, you don't have to do that now, David started, maybe fearing what it contained. Oh, I think now is an excellent time. I slid the will over to the notary as well, and summarized for the room, especially for Dorothy and Marcus's benefit, this new will revokes any prior wills. It establishes educational trusts for each of my grandchildren, to fully fund their college or vocational training when the time comes, and a further trust for each that they can access when they reach age 25, if they meet certain conditions like completing school or maintaining good standing. I glanced at David and Angela. It also provides that my house and remaining assets will go into a trust managed by a third-party trustee, with instructions to allow me to live in my house as long as I live, and to not sell or transfer any major asset without the trustee's approval. Upon my passing, those assets would also fund the trusts for the grandchildren. My son and his wife will receive a small cash bequest as a gesture, but they will not have control over any of my significant assets under this will. Angela's face drained of color. David closed his eyes as if stabbed. They both understood. I was effectively cutting them out of direct inheritance, leaving them nothing but perhaps some token amount. The bulk was for their kids but out of their reach. The kitchen was deathly silent except for the notary's pen scratching as she noted my explanation in her journal, no doubt to ensure everyone heard that. This is punishment," Angela croaked, wiping her cheeks. "How can you do this to your own family?" That ignited the anger I'd kept tempered. "How could you do what you did to your family?" I replied, voice rising for the first time. "Conspiring behind my back to take my home, my money, my freedom, lying to my face that it was for my benefit. Using my grandchildren as pawns in a scheme to bleed me dry. That is not how family treats each other." Angela broke into sobs, burying her face in her hands. David kept staring at the table, tears in his eyes as well. I thought I was doing what you always did, taking care of family's needs," he whispered. "I see now how wrong it was, Dad. I'm so sorry." I believed he was sorry, in this moment. Sorry he went along, sorry he's losing out, sorry he disappointed me. But if I had meekly signed, would he be sorry? Or relieved and content spending my money? I might never know for sure. The notary gently interjected, "Mr. Abernathy, shall we proceed with signing the will? You'll need 2 witnesses to sign as well." Dorothy and Marcus both spoke up then, as if on cue. "I'll witness," Dorothy said firmly, shooting a glare at my son and Dale that could melt steel. Clearly what she'd heard turned her warm neighborly feelings ice-cold toward them. "Me as well," Marcus added. "I think it's a very wise document, Tom." At that, Angela cried harder. David looked physically ill, but he nodded slightly, as if in grim acceptance. The formalities proceeded. I signed the will, Dorothy and Marcus signed as witnesses, the notary notarized it. It was done. I felt an extraordinary calm settle over me. My assets were protected from immediate exploitation. My autonomy was affirmed. And should anything happen to me, my beloved grandkids would be provided for directly, not via their parents. When the notary concluded and began packing up, she gave me a sympathetic look. "I've seen many families struggle with these issues. I'm sorry you had to go through this, but it seems you handled it with foresight." I walked her to the door, thanking her for coming. As she departed, the adrenaline of the last 18 hours began to ebb, leaving me a bit unsteady. But I wasn't done yet. Returning to the kitchen, I saw Angela slumped in her chair, face in hands, and David rubbing her back absent-mindedly, staring off in shame. Dorothy, sensing the need for privacy, gently touched my shoulder. "We'll be next door if you need anything, Tom." "Thank you for everything," I said softly. Marcus gave me a pat on the arm and they both left quietly. I took a deep breath, looking at the 2 people who, not long ago, I would have trusted with my life. They now looked small, defeated. "What now?" Angela asked bitterly without looking up. "Are you going to never speak to us again? Tell the kids what terrible people we are?" There was an edge of fear in her voice, fear of consequences. "Good." David finally raised his head, red-eyed. "Dad, I have no excuse. I was weak and I let us do this to you. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. His voice cracked. I had to swallow back a wave of sadness. It would be easy to fall into guilt myself, to try to comfort him. But I reminded myself, I did not create this mess. I was not the betrayer here. My tone was measured. You're right. It's not enough. Your apologies mean nothing without genuine change. I'm still deeply hurt and upset. It's going to take time, if ever, to rebuild trust. And it will be on my terms. Angela sniffled, regaining some of her composure. We understand you're angry. But maybe one day, you'll see we really thought. I cut her off sharply. Don't try to justify it. I may eventually forgive, but I won't ever forget what you were willing to do to me. She closed her mouth, nodding slightly. I continued, I won't tell the boys the details, for their sake. But they're perceptive. They know something was wrong. You'll have to figure out what to tell them. David cleared his throat. We'll tell them the truth, that we made a mistake and hurt you, and we're going to make it right by changing ourselves. I hoped he meant that. Time would tell. I walked around the table and opened my front door, an unmistakable gesture. I think it's best you both leave now. I need space. We'll talk later. Perhaps. They stood, Angela shaking a little, David steadier but downcast. As they passed me in the doorway, Angela paused. Tom, we do love you. I hope you believe that, even if it's messed up right now. I didn't reply, just gazed at her. She dropped her eyes and stepped out. David gently squeezed my shoulder as he went by. I didn't return the gesture, but I didn't shrug him off either. He seemed to take that as a sign he wasn't entirely shunned. I watched them walk to their car. Before getting in, David turned, eyes on me from across the yard. I'm sorry, he mouthed silently once more. I gave a slight nod, then went inside and closed the door. The quiet that filled my home was overwhelming at first. I sat heavily in my armchair, hands trembling now that the confrontation adrenaline was fading. A mix of triumph and grief washed over me. I had won, I protected myself. But I had also effectively broken my relationship with my only child, at least for now. The trust was shattered, and with it, many happy illusions. But there was still hope in the form of two bright young boys who I dearly loved. They, at least, would be safe and provided for when the time came. Perhaps my relationship with them could even grow closer as I stepped back from subsidizing their parents' lifestyle and instead spent time with my grandkids, nurturing the part of family that still held innocence and love. My phone buzzed, a text from Dorothy checking on me. I replied that I was all right and would come over later for tea. Another text, it was from Ethan, the older grandson, surprisingly, Grandpa, I'm really sorry about everything. I promise I'll make you proud in how I use the college money you're saving for me. Love, E. Tears finally flowed freely down my face. Somehow, he'd figured out the gist of what happened, and still his concern was showing me gratitude. Perhaps I hadn't lost everything today after all. I responded, Love you, Ethan. You make me proud by being who you are. We'll talk soon. As I set the phone down, I noticed on the side table a framed photo I'd turned face down yesterday, the one of my wife, myself, and David on his graduation day. I picked it up and studied Marjorie's warm smile, David's youthful, hopeful face, and my own contented expression. We did okay, Marge, I whispered, my voice shaking. Not perfect, but okay. The rest, I'll try to fix in time. The afternoon sun broke through the gray clouds at that moment, a beam of light falling across the photo. I closed my eyes and let the warmth hit my face. My dignity was intact. My control over my life was secure. The people who tried to underestimate me learned a hard lesson. And I, an old man underestimated by many, had rediscovered my own strength in the process. They would not soon forget it. And neither would I.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.